Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase pricing and availability questions concerning this watch. In 2021, Breitling decided to keep the faith with its traditional enthusiasts of larger watch formats by launching the Super Chronomat, a larger and bolder and perhaps more Schneider era inspired take on Breitling Chronomat Pilot's chronographs. Of course, George Kern, who came in with new ownership in 2017 as CEO, had made a point of shrinking the watches, reducing their size, creating more traditionally proportioned timepieces to bring in watch snobs, watch traditionalists, and those who were wedded to other brands. But it's important to remember where you come from and not alienate the people who sustained Breitling during the 2000s and the 2010s. And so for them, there was the Super Chronomat. This is a 2024 variant of that model line, now adding titanium grade 5, so we have a big watch that wears light. This is, of course, the Super Chronomat B01 44 millimeters in diameter. I measured it 14.6 millimeters thickened from lug tip to lug tip, 52.9 millimeters with a 22 millimeter spacing in between the lugs. We're going to zoom out a little bit, put it on my wrist. My wrist is 16 centimeters in circumference, and the watch wears quite well. Being fairly light, it's big, but it doesn't feel bulky. I don't feel like I'm dealing with a large load or a brick on my wrist. Now, you could argue that it fits me just fine. I would say that you probably do need a wrist a little bit larger than mine to get the most out of it. My wrist is 16 centimeters circumference, and I'd say 17 centimeters would wear this ideally. So 17 and up, you're good to go. If you just want it to fit and you like the oversized look, then you can wear it on a wrist my size. It's neither thick nor thin. I mean, let's be honest, under 15 millimeters for a watch this size is not all that bad, meaning that it will fit underneath some shirt sleeves and all jacket cuffs. This is a timepiece that's designed because it is a little bit biased towards presence and perhaps an extrovert sensibility, so not hiding it under your cuff, well, that's not necessarily a problem. The watch features a Rouleaux-inspired design to the strap, so the Rouleaux bracelet, like the Chronomat, a Breitling child of the 80s. It's important to remember that the original Chronomat debuted in the 1940s as a type of calculator bezel watch, but during the Schneider era, early Schneider era, and the relaunch of the Breitling brand in 1983, the Chronomat became more of an all-around sports chronograph. Yes, inspired by the Italian Frecce Tricolore aerobatic squadron, but also capable of acting, for example, as a dive watch, which this is. So it's an all-around sports watch, and this Chronomat harks back to that one just in a larger size. So we have the grade 5 titanium. That's how we get this nice, handsome, polished bevel, because grade 5 polishes up a whole lot better than grade 2. And it's nice because it gives you the hypoallergenic qualities of titanium, and grade 2 is hypoallergenic. It's also lighter than steel. Grade 5 is those things, but it's also harder and more scratch resistant. I mentioned the Rouleaux bracelet as a product of the 80s. When the Reborn Chronomat came out in 1983, there was a Rouleaux sort of roll-shaped link bracelet. You can see that on the standard Chronomats, but this is designed to echo the design of those Rouleaux bracelets while still being a rubber strap. It's a little bit of a hollow underside, makes it more flexible, allows the wrist to breathe. An important feature, if you do want to get a custom strap for this, you got to recognize that there's a little bit of a shoulder where the strap edges out towards the outer profile of the lugs. So the strap is wider than the 22 millimeter junction between the lugs. So you're either going to want to use a Breitling OEM option that's made for this watch, or tell your custom strap maker to keep in mind just how broad the strap has to be. Rolling around the clasp, you can see we have a trigger actuated clasp with both polish and satin. Twin trigger release, so it cannot pop open unless you press both of those. This is going to keep the watch firmly planted on your wrist during high energy activities, but also one of the advantages of clasps is it makes it harder to drop the watch while you are donning it or removing it at bedside. You can see we have satin in profile, those polished highlights, and then we have the bezel, which is all polished. We have these little ceramic shoulders, or I should say ceramic pushers with polished metal shoulders, and then a ceramic shoulder on the crown itself. The crown, in fact, all of the crowns are screw down. This is a 200-meter water-resistant watch. The bezel is 120 click. It is a unidirectional rotating dive timer bezel, so that's why that is there. And one of the reasons it uses these rider tabs, this has been a feature of Chronomats since the 80s, making it easier to grip this bezel with hands that may be gloved in an aircraft or sweaty or wet if you are diving. So these rider tabs give you that sort of purchase when your hands may be insecure. And then we have these little screws which look really butch, but they're there for a reason. And that reason is that this is a captive bezel with the bezel held to the case using screws, so it doesn't snap on. You have to remove the screws to dismantle the bezel, so it can't be snapped off by an impact the way a Rolex and Omega or a Tag bezel can be. You'll also note the intricacy of the case as it features this pronounced dip down at the end at 6 and 12. It's a little bit of a nuance that's easy to miss if you only look at the photos of these things online. The bezel does have a ceramic insert to resist scratching. We'll do a Lume shot now so you get a good sense of it. The bezel pearl is large, and you can see that we have luminescent references at 15-minute increments, so you can see far more of this bezel as a timing reference than you can of a traditional dive bezel. You'll also note the large style hammerhead hour indices doubled at 12 o'clock, and the unusual use of luminescence on every single hand of the dial, including the chronograph registers. So you can time two events at once, one with the bezel and one with the chronograph. Now we've got a tachymetric scale here, so for example, you want to gauge the speed of an object such as an aircraft over a kilometer. Let's say you're watching the Reno air races. You start the chrono when the aircraft starts the timed segment. You stop the chrono when the aircraft ends the timed segment. You can see that aircraft is going 500 kilometers or miles per hour. Also important, you can see that we've got a beautiful gray brushed, almost stainless steel-like finishing to the style. So it's not a sunburst, it's a top to bottom brushed pattern. We have azurage or concentric patterns in each of the black sunken sub-registers. All the hands as well as the indices and the logo are rhodium plated stainless steel. Likely rhodium plated steel, not stainless, if it's used on a dial. And then you can see we have this other scale inboard of the tachymeter. It's not super easy to see, but you can see it is in cyan. The little numbers are light blue like the seconds hand. That is called a decimeter scale. You see how it ends at 100 under the 60? Decimeters are technical scales that have been out of favor for a long time. Breitling primarily retains them for historic reasons. There are some timing requirements that call for 1/100th or hundredths of a second, and that's what the decimeter scale is for. Now the watch uses a column wheel for a chronograph function cycling. You can see it on the back. And these B01 movements have outstanding column wheel feel. It's also a vertical clutch, so when you engage, there's no jump to the seconds hand, and there's no stagger because a vertical clutch is a seamless engagement that also allows you to leave the chronograph engaged full time with no hazard or additional wear and tear. And when I pull the crown all the way out, I activate hacking seconds. Now everything stops and I can synchronize the small seconds dial to a reference time so my watch is accurate to the second. I also have a quick set for the date down at the bottom so I can cycle the date if I wish to do so. And you can see that Breitling has done a pretty good job of ensuring that all the fonts on the dial are the same. So for example, if you look at that 9 is more or less that 9. A lot of companies make a mistake on that front. Of course, we're not perfect because that 3 and that 3 are not that 3. Rolling around, by the way. Very, very positive, precise, and refined 120 click bezel action. Caliber B01, chronometer certified, 5-position adjusted, 70-hour automatic winding power reserve, column wheel, vertical clutch, 4 hertz beat rate, stop seconds, quick set date. All this pivots on 47 joules. And you can see the watch uses an interesting hybrid regulator. So flat hairspring there, KIF shock protection, and then we've got Edicron used for fine adjustment and beat error correction. And then there's a small eccentric screw that allows for very fine adjustment. And again, a 70-hour power reserve, though, that's usually plus or minus 5 hours. They usually surprise to the good and give you a little bit more, so let's just call it 3 days. If you love this watch, reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.